have a good amount going on, and I want to make sure that we get the chance to hear from everyone. So for those who don't know me, my name is Larissa Wall. I am the Assistant Director of Community Engagement at B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side, and I am so glad that you have chosen to spend about an hour with us this evening to learn more about an organization and campaign called Reclaim Our Vote. Just a little bit of logistics. We have muted everybody because we want to make sure that the speakers have the ability to speak, and we will make sure to take your questions at the end. If you do have questions that you want to hold on to, feel free to message them directly to me or put them in the chat, and I will collect those and we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. I also just want to say that given everything that is going on, I think that our work, we were planning to do this work with Reclaim Our Vote for a while, but I think especially now in this moment when there is so much pain and there is so much suffering and there's so much oppression, doing this work together is what can really affect change. And I am so privileged and honored to have Reclaim Our Vote here, and you'll hear in a minute from Andrea Miller, who is the founder of this campaign, but really, really glad that you are all here and that you're taking this step forward with us. The group that started this work together, we have a group of Upper West Side, mostly Manhattan interfaith group that's starting this work together. It's not an exhaustive list. We are really excited for other folks to come and join us, but we have folks from the West End Collegiate Church, the Church of St. Paul and St. Andrew, B'nai Jeshurun, SAJ, the Marlene Meyerson JCC Harlem, and Fourth Universalist. So we're really, really excited that many members of those communities are here, and others who are hoping to learn what they can do are joining us as well. So we're going to start off with hearing from some folks at Reclaim Our Vote, learning about the phone banking and postcarding opportunities. And then again, at the end, there will be an opportunity for questions. So don't worry, we will get to that. So I wanted to introduce Andrea Miller. She is the founding board member for the Center for Common Ground. She is an election turnout strategist working with underrepresented voters in Virginia, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Arizona, North Carolina, and Colorado. She's also the founding tri-chair of the Virginia Poor People's Campaign. On January 1st, she helped launch National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia and is currently acting president. She has worked as a lobbyist, legislative and political director, and was a regional organizer for MoveOn.org. Andrea is both an organizer as well as a digital advocacy expert. She has appeared on The Thom Hartmann Show, hosted the Progressive Roundtable, and was executive producer on PD Action Radio. As an IT professional, she is also responsible for PD Action's digital strategy and customizes advocacy tools for small to medium-sized organizations through the Progressive Support Project. She is the former co-executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, was the Democratic nominee in 2008 for House of Representatives in the Virginia 4th District, and we are so honored, exhaustive list, wow. I'm so honored and privileged to have you here, and I will let you take it away.
There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so delighted to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. Now, the name of our organization is Center for Common Ground. The campaign that everybody is here to hear about and hopefully become a part of is called Reclaim Our Vote. And the reason it's called Reclaim Our Vote is when I was analyzing the results of some failed past elections, one of the things that I realized was there was a very large, consistent number of voters who voted from a progressive and a very moral perspective. And then when I looked at who didn't vote, I realized there was a very large population of what we refer to as underrepresented voters, community of color voters, who, while they had the ability to vote, they weren't using that ability. So we called our campaign reclaim our vote, because the natural, progressive, moral vote that is already there, if we add in the underrepresented voters, this becomes enough to win elections and move forward as opposed to backwards legislatively. And we first got an opportunity to try this out in 2016 in Virginia. We then tried it out in 2017 in Virginia, when Virginia was having her state races. And we also got an unexpected chance to try it out in the rural Black Belt in Alabama in 2017. And what I realized was numbers are very, very accurate when we look at how we are going to work and do turnout in an election. So where are we working in 2020? Well, in 2020, we all know basically what's at stake. When I was with the North Carolina NAACP for training on Saturday, I told them in 2020, we are literally voting for our lives. We had no idea when we designed our own line of postcards, and we said things like, vote your power, power to the people, and vote for your life. We had no idea how important and how accurate those words were going to be. So the states we are working, and we picked the hard ones, are Alabama, Arizona, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Texas. These are all states that have a very, very strong history of voter suppression. Before we got started, a number of groups were talking about showing the movie Suppressed about the 2018 elections in Georgia. Well, tomorrow, Georgia is having a primary election, and Georgia has not changed. So we have gotten reports of people who attempted to vote by mail and had their mail-in ballot rejected because they folded it wrong. Georgia still uses exact signature matches. The only problem is the people looking at the signatures are not handwriting analysts or any type of handwriting professional. So we're getting people getting their ballots returned, and they're not going to be counted. We also are hearing that polling locations are being closed and they're not really being announced. So when we are calling voters and telling them where to vote, we're discovering, oh, that isn't a polling place anymore. And then when we look at other people and other groups that are calling, we all have the same wrong information. So we are seeing voter suppression continue, and we are seeing literally as much, if not possibly more, in the great state of Texas, where we are going to be working. If you follow Texas, you've seen COVID-19 cannot be used as an excuse to vote by mail. Yes, COVID-19 can be used. And we've watched Judge A overrule Judge B only to be overruled by Judge C. And I can't help but wonder, what must it be like for a voter in Texas who's maybe an older voter who doesn't have a computer? How are they going to figure out what the law is and what it is that they are supposed to do when it is literally changing weekly? If someone had told us 5 years ago, that they were going to make a movie like this, we would have said, oh, that is just so unbelievable. That can never happen here. Well, it has happened, and it did happen. And so we are going to have to work very hard to fight to help people keep their ability to vote. I have also heard people say, oh, we really shouldn't be running after people who have been dumped from the voting rolls. Let's just concentrate on those people who can still vote. Well, there are 245 million age eligible voters in the United States. 48 million of those voters have either been deactivated, they are inactive, or they've actually been unregistered. And 16.6 million of them are voters of color. And so what we are seeing is literally, as fast as we manage to register voters and get them in the door, the county boards of elections, the secretaries of state are shoving them out the door at the rate of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands a year. Felony disenfranchisement up until 2019 removed 8.2 million citizens from the voting rolls. And because you have a felony conviction, you will no longer be able to vote. So this is where we find ourselves. This is why we are here. And we must do two things. Number one, begin to get people back on the voter rolls. I am estimating that roughly 40% of people who have been thrown off the voting rolls do not know that they no longer have the ability to vote. So it is very important that we let them know. And we let them know by calling them on the phone, by sending them very, very colorful postcards, and a number of other ways. Now we're actually looking at maybe we are going to begin a texting program for voters. North Carolina NAACP is rolling out a very exciting program that we're going to work on this summer, where we will be communicating with active voters, and we're going to be asking them to pledge to vote and do more. So not only do we want you to vote, we're going to want you to help your neighbors and your families and make sure that they still have, and notice I'm going to say the ability to vote, not the right. If we had the right to vote, it wouldn't be so easy for people to take it from us. So thank you for all the work you are going to do with Reclaim Our Vote, so that in November, we are having a huge celebration for righteousness and justice. And then I'm going to give one more reference. I was reminded on Saturday that the civil rights movement became a powerhouse movement when the faith community and labor locked arms in solidarity with the civil rights movement. So it is time to revisit history and bring the old along with the brand new. I told the North Carolina NAACP, you are now going to be able to say you are the oldest and you are the boldest, and now you've gone digital. So thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Again, we're so glad to have you here. And if you have folks for questions for Andrea, we are, please put them in the chat them directly to me. We will have a Q&A at the end. But now it is my privilege to introduce Laura Hembree. So Andrea gave us this great overview of Reclaim Our Vote, why, a little bit of the history, why the work is so important and why it's so important today. And Laura Hembree, who lives on the, as she says, the upper west side of Manhattan, is the Manhattan Regional Coordinator and has been organizing a lot of the community members and individuals on Manhattan to do this work, and what a task. So I'm going to pass it over to her, and she will share a little bit more about the work at the city level and start to get us into what we as individuals and our communities can be doing with Reclaim Our Vote as we begin our partnership. Go ahead, Laura. Sorry, give us just a second. Laura, you should be
I think
unmuted.
I'm unmuted now. It's a little bit of a process here, you know. So, you know, thank you. Hold on, I have to just do this thing. Thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you, everyone who's here. It's a real honor to be meeting with you and your faith communities. This is something that Reclaim Our Vote has wanted for some time, to be meeting with you, because we think it's a very natural fit. Reclaim Our Vote in Manhattan is working with faith communities, activist groups, and informal groups around the city. Nationally, Reclaim Our Vote has sent out 1.4 million postcards reflecting our campaign to re-register voters who have been deregistered, and as Andrea pointed out, oftentimes do not even know they've been deregistered. But voters can be disenfranchised in many ways, even active voters, simply by the suppression tactics that are used, such as closing polls, or now this horrible change and confusion of changing voting rules because of COVID-19, and then disinformation and voter intimidation. So Reclaim Our Vote as a nonpartisan campaign is there to empower and aid voters of color in these voter suppression states with something essential, and that's information. So Reclaim Our Vote in Manhattan is generally working with one or two people who coordinate their groups. They're working with groups, and they'll work with one or two people who are coordinators from interested groups. And the group's coordinators will work with us, or will work with the lead volunteers in Manhattan. And we will then be able to provide and help them get materials in terms of postcarding. So how does that work? So there's the postcard, there's the stamp, there's the script, there's the names and addresses, and there's a label which is not for the address, but it contains specific local information about the local Board of Elections, which is what people need that we're postcarding. And one of the fantastic things about Reclaim Our Vote is how targeted and focused it is on specific areas where people really need this information. So we're postcarding voters of color in specific districts and areas, and we use a very simple script that Reclaim Our Vote has had approved by the State Board of Elections. And then the volunteer handwrites this script to the voter and writes their names and address on, then adds this label kind of in the middle of the handwritten script, which gives this valuable voter information on the label. And Reclaim Our Vote provides the addresses, the names, the script, and the specific voter information. And, you know, as a faith community, I think it's interesting because this is actually, I think, a miracle. And the miracle is, in this digital age that we're in, something as simple as a handwritten postcard can make all the difference in the world to somebody who needs and wants to vote. So Reclaim Our Vote has a fabulous 6-minute postcard training video, which Larissa will send out to you, which gives details about the whole process of postcarding. And then your group can work with Reclaim Our Vote, and we can start postcarding with you. So I just want to let you know that, generally speaking, we feel that our postcards, especially when we are re-registering people, we think we have actually about a 25% success rate. That is that 25% of the people who receive the postcards actually register to vote. And Andrea tells this wonderful story about how she called, I think, a couple of counties in Texas before we started postcarding there and found out, well, you know, they were getting maybe 10 people to re-register a month. And then after we started postcarding there for like 2.5 months, they had something like 2,250 people re-registering. So it's really meaningful and it's really successful. But in these times of changing voting rules, and believe me, they are changing, as she said, by the week, phone banking is actually a very nimble and essential tool for informing people of these changing rules around voting, because phone banking can do it very quickly. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to our core leader, Nancy Goodman. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Larissa and Andrea, and it's so great to meet everyone. So I'm from California and on the core leadership team, and also do phone bank support and postcard support. And I work really closely with Laura. We probably talk or email every day or so. So any questions, we will really support you on that. Our phone banks are basically what we call is hidden in plain sight. And Larissa has a little PowerPoint that she's going to show. You could start with the first slide. Our phone banks, I'm just going to do a demo, a little kind of demo here. We do have a great phone bank video, and Larissa's going to send you out a link to that. But if you do want to sit down and phone bank, you could do it right now. You just need a computer or a tablet and a phone. You use your phone to make the calls. And yes, they can see your number unless you block it. However, that's never been a problem. The voters we call tend to be happy to hear from us. And you use your computer or tablet to look up the voter. So looking at this slide, and it's just a little demo, you looked at the Center for Common Ground website, and there's a tab that says campaigns, and it's a screenshot. I hovered on campaigns, I hovered on the voter project, and over to the right, I see a list of counties: Arizona, Georgia, Alabama. These are the counties that we would potentially be phone banking into. Right now it's Georgia, because like Andrea said, there's an election tomorrow. And after tomorrow, it will be Texas, which has a primary runoff July 14th. So our phone banks are either voter registration, which we do all year round, or they're get out the vote. Those are different populations of voters. Voter registration, we're calling people that got knocked off the rolls, and we just give them information. Like Laura said, we just say, you might want to check your voter status. Here's how you can check. Get out the vote, it's a different group. We're calling people who are active voters, who are on the list as active voters, and they can just go right in and vote. So what we're calling is Georgia today and saying, here's the voting information for tomorrow. We call voters of color. I think Andrea answered one of the questions in the comments. People always say, where do you get your data? We call on behalf of the NAACP because we get the NGP van voter data from them, which comes originally from the State Board of Elections. They're the ones that keep track of whether you're registered, whether you're inactive, or whether you're deregistered or unregistered. And Andrea basically filters for voters of color. She filters for people who are listed as African American, Hispanic, Native American, or Asian American. And that's our population. Then she can cut it more according to age and so forth. And every phone bank is for a particular county. So we're going to look at Georgia. If you want to go to the next slide. When you click on the state of Georgia, which we're just looking at, you've at the top of the page, you see a map on the left with all the counties. And on the right, you see a list of election resources. Those are live links that you can click on. Whenever you're in phone bank mode, I urge you to keep this particular tab open. On the right at the bottom, you see information from vote writers about what their voter ID requirements are. So this is just a good resource. And if you scroll down, go to the next slide, Larissa. you see a little bit more in writing on Georgia or the state that you're looking at. So this is Georgia. It talks a little about how many House seats and Senate seats. It talks about online registration, vote by mail, early voting, election day voting, and then it tells you how many voters there are, and then it lists some of the Black Belt counties. So this is good. Before you phone bank in any state, read this information, even print it out if you need to, so you kind of have it handy. The next slide, and there really aren't that many slides. Larissa, you can go to the next one. If you keep scrolling down, you get a list of counties, and under each county is a little red highlighted code. That's a phone bank. So you can click on any phone bank. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes the most priority one is listed at the top. But I see on this slide that all the phone banks are listed primary, get out the vote. So that's basically who we're calling. Clayton County, DeKalb County, Glenn County. Then I get to Fulton County. These are people who are ages 40 to 85. Fulton County is a big county that includes Atlanta. And there's 2 lists of those people. Because there are so many people in that county, we tend to sometimes give slightly different information to older voters because we don't expect them to necessarily click on web links. We're more likely to give them a phone number. So if you click on a phone bank, you get to the next slide. This is just so it won't be so unfamiliar. You get a slide that says get started. Now you're going to get from Larissa after this training, you're going to get a link to the phone bank video, which will go over all this. So don't feel you need to remember all this, and a link to the phone bank guidelines. But basically it's open virtual phone bank, start making calls. If you've called for other candidates, or I know this is used by some candidates, it's platforms used by sister district, it will look familiar to you. But you have to click on get started. So you can go to the next slide. And get started, it'll ask you for your action ID. And if you don't have one, you can create one. So that's pretty straightforward. My only advice is pick a really easy password. This is not a security issue. Don't take a password that you use for your financial or any other important information. I generally use something like Vote 2020 with a capital V because it does need a capital. Because half the battle we get phone bankers who say, I can't remember my password. So make it really simple. Make it something that you can really easily remember. If you do log in, then go to, I think the next slide is almost the final slide. Here's where you have it. You immediately see a voter's name and information about the voter. This voter is Marion Byers. It gives you the phone number that you'll be using your phone to call her. It gives you her age. She's a 61-year-old female. And we are going to delete this PowerPoint when we're done because this is personal voter information. On the left, it tells you what county she's in, Clayton County, and what her polling address is. Notice that we didn't have a password to get into the phone bank. As long as you have an action ID, you can get into this phone bank. And if you're doing a phone bank and you get into trouble, heck, you can just close that phone bank out and go back into another phone bank or go back into the same phone bank again. It's very easy. That's what we say when they're sort of hidden in plain sight. So the script is pretty straightforward. Generally, this is get out the vote. Mostly our scripts start by, hello, my name is Nancy. I'm a volunteer with the Georgia NAACP. They pronounce it NAACP, and we do use their data, so generally we use that as our identification. Every script then is different, but you always ask for the voter name. First and last name. Is Marion Byers available? Because there might be multiple people named Marion, or there might be multiple people named Byers. And then it's straightforward. The Georgia primary election is June 9th. Can we count on you to vote? And it says choose an option, and they either already voted or in which case you say, thank you for being a voter, have a great day. Or they say they're not eligible, and you say, thank you for taking time to speak with me. So I'm not going to go through the rest of the script. after tomorrow, we'll be moving to Texas scripts. They'll look similar to this, except it'll say the Texas election is July 14th, and you can early vote starting in early July. So that's basically pretty simple. There's one final slide, Larissa, which is pretty important, if you can go back to it. And I'm going to go over this because a lot of times you don't reach the voter. You leave a message, and if you don't reach the actual voter, Marianne, then you're going to click one of these radio buttons. If you leave a message, that's pretty obvious. That's the one you would put. If nobody answers, you say not home. If the voter answers and she says, this is Marion, and then hangs up on you, you put refused. Don't put refused if someone else in the household hangs up on you because the voter didn't refuse. If the person who answers says she's deceased or moved, you note that. We usually don't do call back because we have so many numbers and not that many callers. We won't call them back. If you get a busy signal or fast signal, you say busy. Wrong number is if you're told it's a wrong number. And I just wanted to focus on disconnected. A lot of times you get a message that says, this number is no longer in service. Check the number and call again. We mark those as not home. People say, why don't you mark them as disconnected? It's because sometimes these rural voters in the South may be lower income and maybe they just didn't pay their bill and their phone went out of service for a month or 2 months until they pay their bill. If we mark them disconnected, that phone number gets taken off the list. If we say not home, that phone number stays on the list and we can call them again for the next election. So what we instruct people to do to remember the easy to remember rule is if you hear the word disconnected on the message, you mark it disconnected. If you don't hear the word disconnected, you mark it not home. So if the message is, this number is disconnected or no longer in service, you mark it disconnected. So that's it. That's the training. You save and go to the next person. And when you're done, you just exit out of the system and log off. It's very straightforward. But the fun thing is sometimes when you do get a voter, and there's a lot of bad numbers because these people have been ignored by the political parties for decades. Sometimes the numbers are old. It's the number they gave to the State Board of Elections 20 years ago. So you get a lot of not homes or bad numbers or not in service. But when you get a voter, they tend to be really happy to hear from you. And sometimes they say, well, no one's called me. I haven't gotten a call before. I didn't know there was an election. I didn't know my congressman died and there's a special election. And one man in Texas, he said, I didn't know voters over 65 could vote by mail. Well, I'm going to tell all my friends that. So it ripples out. It's a positive experience because you get such uplifting stories from the individual voter who's usually so happy to hear from you. And very rarely do people refuse. I think Andrea said the percentage of refusals is really low compared to most phone banks. And you feel like you've made a personal connection. I think, and it doesn't matter. It has never seemed to matter that you're calling from out of state and you don't have a Southern accent. That has never been a problem. People have been open and welcoming when we call. So that's it. And thank you for your time. And then you can watch the video and make phone calls and everything will be good. And you'll get 50 to 85% of the people that you leave a message for or call are going to vote.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was great. And again, for folks who are, I know some folks were joining us throughout Nancy's presentation and Laura's before, we will be sending out, just to give you a sense of what we'll be sending out afterwards, I'm going to send out an email that will have the link to Suppressed, which is only 37 minutes. It's very short. I highly recommend all of you watch it. That will give you answers to why voters are left off the rolls, often Black voters and Black and brown communities and low-income voters. It's very explicit and it's very intentional. You will be getting a video of the phone banking as well as postcarding to give you more information on that. So you'll have those 3 videos to watch, and I'll send you some additional resources that we've received from Reclaim Our Vote while we and the other communities that we're working with work with Laura to figure out the best way to disseminate postcards and other things. So I'm actually going to say one more thing, and then we're going to move into the Q&A. I know there was a question about who pays for postage. What does Reclaim Our Vote give individuals and our communities? They will provide us with all of the addresses. They will provide us with the timely scripts, and they will provide us with a template for labels that go on the postcards. What we will need to provide our individuals, if you already have postcard stamps and postcards, there's a specific type of postcard to use. They ask that you don't use anything with an American flag or anything else with other symbols like that. They actually have their own design, and I'm happy to share that with you. You can order your own. We are hoping to organize putting together some packets for folks, but if you have all of the things necessary, a printer, ability to buy some labels, we'll send you the template, the scripts, and the addresses. You can get started with postcarding on your own. It will take about 2 weeks or so for BJ and the other communities that are working on this to figure out a distribution system and to order the supplies we need. And then in terms of phone banking, we are going to be organizing some phone banking calls, and Laura is actually going to join us and help us walk through some of those. So I know there are a lot of questions about what to do if this happens, or, you know, all of those things. So we're hoping to organize some times when a bunch of us can get together and do both phone banking together. I saw a question about, can you order supplies individually? Yes, you're more than welcome to order supplies individually. Now that we have everybody's email, we can be in touch with you and make sure that Laura can get us the information to give to you so you can start postcarding right away. But we're also hoping to build this out as a collective effort so folks can come and pick up packages. And we also are working on a delivery system for folks who are not leaving their homes for health and safety reasons. We want to make sure that those folks can participate too. So I'm actually, Andrea, I know Andrea was very active on the chat throughout all of that, was very helpful. As I go through and look at some of the other questions, which I'll make sure to answer, I would love, Andrea, if you could just share a little bit some of the responses you were sending to folks, just so that everybody can hear them. And just another note, we are recording this. I will send out the recording of this. So I know there was a lot of information downloaded. You don't have to take notes. You can re-watch this. The videos that I'm sending as a follow-up are very helpful, and I'm in constant communication with Laura. So any of the questions that you have, we will make sure to follow up with them. No question will go unanswered, but I'm gonna turn it over to Andrea just for a few minutes to share some of the things that she was putting in the chat box.
One of the questions that we got was, where do we get our phone numbers? National NAACP has their own copy of NGP Van, which is a system that provides us with a way to set up online phone banks and call voters using the numbers that are in the system. So there are phone numbers there, and we use that for our phone banking. We also use it to get voter addresses, their names, and their age, and most of the time, whether they're male or female, because if we are doing postcards and or phone banking and we are calling the Deep South, it is appropriate to address women of all ages as Miss. We don't worry about whether or not they're married. The Old South, Alabama, Mississippi, even Georgia, it's Miss Jones. Is Miss Mary Smith there? That Miss is the nod to Southern gentility. They're doing a whole bunch of other things that are not at all genteel, but we show respect for the way things are in the South. There's a lot we want to change, but we respect our voters and we show our voters that we respect them. And that's very important important if you're calling the South and you obviously do not have a Southern accent and you are not Southern.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to answer a couple of questions that came through. And if for some reason I don't get to your question, feel free to respond to the email that I'm going to send. I'm also, just in a minute, I would love for some of the other partners to share a little bit about what you've already started to organize in your own communities, if you wanted to share with folks. So somebody asked if folks who don't live nearby or who want to get involved on their own and are ready to go, will we send the info to them so they can order postcards and labels ahead of time? Yes, happy to send the requirements of what the postcards look like, send the Reclaim Our Vote postcards, which I highly recommend. The designers are amazing artists. We can support them by making sure to use their work. And all of those labels, Laura will be able to get those to me. I can send them to all of you. You'll get a series of follow-up emails. So the one after this meeting will not be the only one, don't worry. And then we can get you started individually. In terms of the question about the teams, I think Laura answered this in the chat, but each of our communities is going to figure out kind of on our own some of the follow-up, but we are looking to figure out how best to organize collectively. We are hoping at BJ to be like a distribution center, to get some volunteers involved to put together packets, socially distanced, wearing PPE, in a room together, just putting together packets so that folks can come to the building to pick up. So if you're interested in doing something like that, let me know. And again, in terms of postage and stamps, I believe that our communities will be buying a lot of those supplies and putting them together as packets. But we will be requesting that folks support us in that so that we can make sure that we are both paying it forward and also making sure that we can order all the supplies that we need. There was a question, actually, Andrea, about polls being closed. Polls can be closed to suppress voting, but how are seniors who have voted for years being deregistered? Do you have a...
Yes, I have the answer for that. What we found is that 18 to 30-year-olds have a very, very, very low deregistration rate. The removal from the rolls goes up as the person gets older. So the greatest number of people that have been deregistered are 45 years old and older. In other words, you have missed at least 2, maybe 3 federal elections where, for whatever reason, you were unable or chose not to vote. And so in states like Georgia and Texas, missing elections means you will eventually lose your ability to vote. They will simply deregister you and say, you're not voting, you're no longer registered.
Thank you so much. So I'm, for folks who don't have it, if you want to, I'm putting my email address in the chat. Feel free to email me, but again, you will be getting that follow-up. But I wanted to open it up now for some of the folks who've been working with me on this as thought partners and thinking about how to involve our communities. I'd love to hear from you. Maybe Brian, if you want to share a little bit about what JCC and Engage is working on, and then can open it up to the other folks from the other leaders who I've been working with, if you would like to share anything. Brian, I think you can unmute yourself.
As said, you can certainly do this work individually. So if you want to get started in doing some phone banking based on the training that we had here today and the video that you'll receive, or if you want to get some postcards and begin that work on your own, you can absolutely do that. But there are a number of communities, faith communities that partnered to put together today's information session, and that's the JCC, Marlene Meyerson JCC, and the JCC Harlem, the Church of St. Paul and St. Andrew, West End Collegiate, SAJ, B'nai Jeshurun. I feel like I'm missing one or two, a couple of others on the Upper West Side. And so we are going to, the people who coordinated today's event are also going to be looking at how we can do some coordinated follow-up sessions, whether that's Teams or Zoom phone banking with Laura, or as Larissa said, the postcarding distribution, so that there'll be a lot of ways for people to connect and for people to get involved, and some of it to do on your own, and some of it to do within your own community, and some of it to do in this interfaith partnership that we're building around this issue. So we're really excited to be sharing more of that information with you as we create those opportunities over the next several months, and hope that you will participate in all of the ways that you possibly can.
Great, thank you, Shuli. All right, so as a reminder, what I am sending you after this meeting, I will make sure to include both of the training videos for phone banking and for postcarding, as well as suppressed. Again, Rabbi Brian Fink is working with JCC and Engage to host a viewing. It's also 37 minutes if you do want to watch it on your own. Watch it again, have a discussion with them. I think it's something that doesn't need to be watched just one time. There's a lot to unpack there. And in addition to some follow-up steps, as Shuli just said, we are going to be getting back together and rolling those out over the coming weeks. So we have, since you've registered, we have your information. If you do have specific questions for me about that, you can send me an email. And if I don't have any of the answers, I'm happy to connect you with Laura or Nancy or Andrea. Make sure that you get those answers. So again, thank you very much for coming. We are so glad that you all could join us this evening, and I look forward to being in touch with you in the next day or so. Have a good evening.